Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly ag weather forecast brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Here we are at the beginning of our first week of 2022. We got a pretty powerful winter storm that's moving through early in the morning here on Monday. You can see it here on satellite rapidly intensifying, but it's going to move very quickly on offshore here. In fact, it's going to move a little bit farther to the north of that, going right through this part of Virginia. Now, as this low pressure system went through this morning, we had quite a bit of strong storms, but overall, the concern is going to be on the northern side of this. This whole region in through here is under winter storm warning, and we're expecting quite a bit of heavy snow there. But we did have our fair share of severe weather that moved through this part of North Carolina early this morning. In fact, I was watching it here on radar. Let me just take you back. You can see that low really quickly wrapping up here. Very heavy precipitation pushing up against the Appalachian Mountains. A broad shield of rain out ahead of it here, but it was the strong storms to the south. See, there was two separate lines here that came through parts of South Carolina into North Carolina, and some of these did produce some strong straight line winds and quite a bit of lightning. But that's it. They're out. They move through very, very quickly. And now what we're watching on the back side of this is the potential for some snow. That's right, snow coming in through here. Real quick, though, the storms are still moving through the coast. And I was watching on my favorite website here, blitzertongue.org, where some of those live lightning strikes were this morning. And you can see here the storms still starting to exit. But I think what's on a lot of folks' mind is how much snow we're going to get out of this. Now, this was through very early this morning, looking at snowfall. And so we can see that back through parts of the Mid-South, the Tennessee Valley, then coming up to the Appalachian Mountains, there have been places in through here that have already picked up a couple of inches of snow. But it's where that snow line is going to be as we move throughout the day today. That's going to be a very, very challenging forecast to pick up on. So let's go take a look at it here. This is from the National Digital Forecast Database. So this is what the National Weather Service gives us, all right? And as you look at it here, we can see that the better chances for picking up more than 2 inches of snow are going to be north of us in Virginia, with possibly the heaviest bands coming right in through here, cutting right straight through, this part of Virginia, getting into Maryland and eventually into Delaware, where 6 to possibly up to 10 to 15 inches of snow could fall depending on elevation. But don't be surprised to see some snowflakes flying here in parts of northern North Carolina. I like to show you that by going straight to our high resolution NAM model. Now, as we play this forward, what you're going to see is, let's get it there, about 7 a.m. this morning, pushing through the middle of the morning and then getting to when that low is off the coast here by early afternoon. And if you notice, the models are bringing in enough cold air on the backside to bring in some of the white stuff here. So expect to see some snowflakes falling. We're not expecting much accumulation given the ground temperatures, but on grassy surfaces, we could get, possibly a good coating of snow here. But this low is already offshore by, 5 to 6 p.m. this evening, and it's moving out very, very quickly. And behind it, really what's going on here is high pressure is going to move in. We're going to see a clipper system run through this section of the country here in the northern plains Canadian prairie, and just persistent, strong onshore flow into the west throughout much of this week. But we'll come back here in a few moments to talk about when our next chances of getting some precipitation are over in the Carolinas, because it could be as early as Wednesday, some lightly scattered precipitation. It's actually due to this low here. We're drawing in that moisture and wrapping it around just like that. But we need to see when our next big system could possibly come through here, because certainly the beginning of 2022 is a lot different from the way 2021 ended. And I want to talk about that because throughout much of the month of December, this massive ridge of high pressure over the Aleutian Islands controlled everything. So this was largely due to what was going on in the tropics. Remember, we had a lot of discussions in December about the MJO, and the position and strength of La Nina. And that created this larger ridge here, which dove these deep troughs into the west and kept it very, very cold here in the Canadian prairie. We then saw a larger ridge broaden out here across parts of the Mid-South over toward the Mid-Atlantic. So therefore the flow went around it something like that. And that pattern was quite persistent. I want to show you what it gave us. First, the precipitation side of it. This is December precipitation ranks by climate district. We saw improvement in the drought. We'll look at the drought monitor in a moment here. Throughout much of the West, the northern plains and upper Midwest, drought expanded in the southern plains down here and parts of the lower Mississippi River Valley, and as you can see in North Carolina through parts of the Mid-Atlantic. So the precipitation coming through today is absolutely critical for this region, which was so very dry. So let's go ahead and take a look at our latest drought monitor, which came out back here on December the 30th. That would have been last Thursday. Now that was the day we saw those horrific fires spreading here in and around the Boulder, Colorado area that, of course, you saw in the news engulfed so many homes there. Those storms, those winds were between 60 and 115 miles an hour. And they just raced across the very, very dry parts of the prairie here in the plains. Just to let you know, there are some places in through here that didn't have any snow in the month of December. That's extremely rare. And also some places here hadn't measured more than 1/4 inch of rainfall since the end of July. So this area was extremely dry. But we've also seen our drought area expand as well. And I'd like to show you that. Let's go up here to the change maps. And if we take a close look here, over the last 3 months, we can see that we've had up to a 3-class degradation in this area. So that's why this precipitation coming through right now is so critical. But I want you just to take a look at the whole of the cotton belt down here. This has been an area that has largely missed a lot of this precipitation. So the forecast I'm about to show you is very important to this area going forward. Let's add to that our latest soil moisture values. This goes down to 40 centimeters or about 16 inches. And again, you can see how dry it's been in the high plains. But we've seen wetter conditions in through here as of late, and that has spread over North Carolina today, so I expect to see some improvement in this map tomorrow. Now, before I get into the details of the near term, I want to give you that long-range outlook first, and it begins with this map or this graphic. Now, I've shown you these a lot, and I hope you're looking at this going, what in the world does that tell me? And that's what I want you to ask, because from today all the way through the next 15 days, this is looking at the tropical wind field in our trade winds. And we're not getting strong signals from either the MJO or the La Nina in the Central Pacific anymore. That means that this pattern is in a state of flux. It's changing. Now, what's important about that is to take a look at what's currently going on with this La Nina. Because if you notice in this region, the cooler ocean temperatures have backed off somewhat. Remember how they were quite cold all the way over here? Well, now what we're starting to see is what we call an east-focused La Nina. For the second half of this winter, we expect most of the coldest water to remain on the eastern side of the Pacific Ocean. At the same time that that's occurring, we've expanded the region of cold water here, and that's going to influence the North Pacific jet stream. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a few moments. But let's get a little bit more information about an east-focused La Nina event to finish out this winter. You see, when you look in the month of January, let's blow this up a little bit. There we go. In the month of January, if we correlate the precipitation pattern in what we call Niño region 1-2, that's right up against South America, we tend to find that it's wetter in parts of the Mid-South over toward the Appalachian Mountains in the Ohio River Valley. And the drier conditions to the south here and in the southern plains aren't nearly as dry as we saw when there was much colder water extending clear out into the western Pacific. So what this means is this shift that we're seeing right now in the tropics is going to produce better chances of seeing precipitation along the mid-Atlantic. Now, that MJO was pretty strongly into phase 7 for a while, but is now forecast to collapse. See, that's coming back into what we call null space, which removes it as a strong predictor for the upcoming weather pattern. So remember, we focused so much on the MJO in November and December because it was at high amplitude. But now things are starting to shift around a bit. So let's see what all of this means. And what it initially means is the North Pacific jet stream and fluctuations in the temperature pattern between the mid-latitudes and the polar regions might become the more dominant factor moving forward. Now, translation to all of that. We see throughout this week, this is Monday into Tuesday, now into Wednesday, deeper troughs of low pressure in place here. I'll show you the temperatures and their impact on that in a few moments. But these deeper troughs bring in convergent flow here and drier weather overall through the middle and end of this week. Once we get into Friday and then into Saturday, we do have a brief ridge coming through here, but watch what this is going to do past our weekend. Remember earlier in this video, I showed you what was going on here over the Aleutian Islands, that big ridge? It's now been temporarily replaced with a deeper trough. So the flow is going to come over the top and then down like this. Now what that means is temporarily through the second week of January, northwest flow, cooler weather, and drier conditions. But I don't expect that to last too long. I want to show you what this translates into though. Looking out there into week 2, that's what you're seeing here. Notice the drier conditions forecast here and the drier conditions that are in the west. Again, this is, I think, a temporary part of this pattern. And the reason why I say that is there's still some evidence based upon ocean temperatures, the behavior of La Nina, that we're going to go back over to an active pattern here. because from the 10th of January to the 10th of February, you can see how we're seeing above average precipitation there. We'd expect that, right? And that's why we intend by mid-month, toward the end of the month, to see a much more active storm track through this area, which returns near normal to above normal precipitation to the Carolinas and mid-Atlantic. That's not just found here in the ECMWF, it is also seen here in the longer range model forecast by the CFSV2. They got a little bit farther to the east and south storm track, but still you can see January 17th to the 23rd, near normal to above normal precipitation. It's also there to finish this month. So I'm seeing some consistency in the long range models here, giving us a better idea of what to anticipate. I do anticipate the temperature pattern to fluctuate rapidly, which means looking at a whole month's temperature pattern is not going to be representative of what's going to happen. So I'm going to show you that kind of week by week here in a few moments. Okay, we've got the bigger picture there. Let's now go take a look at what to expect after we get past today's big winter storm. So it comes through and it's already offshore by this evening and the higher pressure comes in. Now you know that getting into the day on Wednesday, we talked about around this low, some chances for some scattered showers. But after that goes through, our next system takes shape by Thursday midday into Thursday evening right here. And what happened is it came out of Colorado, dipped into what we call the Arklatex region, which is there, and becomes a low moving through the Tennessee Valley. Now as that occurs, by Friday, getting into Friday early morning, that front's going to come through. See it right there? And therefore we're going to get some snow on the Appalachian Mountains, mostly on the west-facing slopes, and we're going to watch out for some showers moving through this area. But this low is basically dipping south and then quickly running up here into New England. So therefore we get into the dry slot of this system by Friday morning, early Friday morning, and it moves on out. That means going into our weekend, high pressure takes back over. Now, speaking about the weekend, with the high pressure cell is here, remember the flow comes around it like this. So that high pressure cell is going to move east, and then early next week, possibly as early as Sunday, we could get some return flow around the back side of that low coming in here, bringing us another chance at precipitation. But that's it. You've got today, you've got a chance of showers on Wednesday, and then possibly early Friday morning getting some precipitation with snow in the Appalachian Mountains and to our north. After that, possibly on Sunday evening. Overall, you add all that up, and that's not an abundant amount of precipitation we're expecting after the system today. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the week 2 pattern brings in a big trough here, so the flow starts doing something like this. Now, flow out of the northwest in the jet stream in winter produces convergence here. Convergence in the upper levels of the atmosphere results in sinking motion and drier conditions. And that's why looking out to that second and start of the third week of January, we see this region going over toward a bit of a drier pattern. But remember, I don't expect this to last long. I think by the time we get into the third week of January and beyond, we're going to start to pick back up with an active storm track into this area. So I think this pattern shift we're talking about in the Pacific is temporary. Okay? Now, let's go from here and have a discussion about temperatures, because December 2021 is going to go down as one of the warmest Decembers on record. In fact, every location that you see the number 1 here means that that particular climate reporting district had its warmest December on record, and those records go back to 1893. Across North Carolina, it was a top 10. All right, we'll get the official statistics from the National Climatic Data Center hopefully later on this week. Well, where are these temperatures going? Well, today we're still cold, right? As we go into tomorrow, we hang on to that colder bias. But notice the warm-up happening in the midsection of the country. That warmer air starts to move toward us on Wednesday and is here by Thursday. So you see we go back up into the upper 40s, lower 50s into the interior, and closer to upper 50s, lower 60s along the coast. But you also see that by Thursday, a deep pool of cold air comes in behind that system, and it pushes over us to the weekend. That's when our front comes through and gives us our chance at precipitation. So we've got a cooler start to the weekend, but possibly more mild on Sunday. But remember why. The high pressure cell moves here, and the flow starts coming out of the south again. But notice, we're already reloading with colder air again. That's why I told you this temperature pattern is going to be quite volatile. And if we just step this out and look out here day 5 through 10, we start to see the effect of that ridge that's building in this area. We're going to have cold shots of air coming through New England, near normal temperatures for us, but how we get near normal is highly volatile. One day above, the next day below. But out there day 10 through 15, This is the first time I've seen a mild pattern for the Canadian prairie for a while here in the Central Plains, but we do expect colder air to be anchored over parts of New England. Now, the good news about this pattern is I don't see a connection with it and the polar vortex. If we just kind of zoom in here, polar vortex is stretched a bit right now, and it is sitting over the tropospheric part of the polar vortex, but they're not connected. In other words, these winds are still very strong and it's not fully disrupted. The longer range model forecasts are doing this with the polar vortex too. By January 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, it's still deepening in this area. But then getting fully into that second week, you see how the polar vortex stays strong and then kind of just starts to move back over the Arctic. That's good. That means that if it's strong and moving north, that it's going to keep that brutally cold air in place there, which means we're going to have to wait later in January, even February, if we're going to watch for a big disruption in the polar vortex. One last thing I want to point out to you about all of this. I'm going to show you, I'm just going to take you really quickly here to one of my favorite websites. It's called iPad. There it is. This is from the USDA. I'm going to go show you what's going on right now in Brazil. So we'll finish this up with a quick look at Brazil, and I'm going to show you the month of December. There it is. Now, throughout the month of December, very, very wet weather in Brazil's northern and eastern growing areas. In fact, flooding over here in Bahia. But as you get down into Paraná, Sao Paulo, down into Rio Grande do Sul, this area here, which is about 30 to 35% of Brazil's growing area, exceptional drought. In fact, some of the driest we've seen on record there. The Paraná River, which flows right in through here, is at, in places near record lows, and those drier conditions have extended into Argentina. We are expecting better precipitation in the coming week in the northern part of this, but we will likely see yield loss to the first crop of soybeans and any full season crop like corn that's been grown in this area. So we're going to watch this all very, very carefully in South America as we press forward throughout the next several weeks here, because they're going to be harvesting the first crop north, planting that second crop or safrinha crop, which is a mix of corn and cotton, and we're going to be harvesting a full season crop down here very soon as well. So we'll keep an eye on all of this and report back to you again next week. Until then, have a good one, and we'll talk to you then. Thanks.